years with Gap Inc. and then Tilly's, and spanned from operational management to HR to overall training and development. So relationships and recruiting and retention and all of these words that translate into our world have definitely been those that I've leaned on the most. And with that, I'm kind of going to go into my spiel here. So when I first entered real estate in 2019, all I really knew was what I knew, right? And I had a business partner who had been in the business for quite some time. And he had a good mix of past business. He'd been doing real estate for almost 20 years. And then we were supplementing with paid leads, right? Like many agents do. So we had a Zillow territory, we had Redfin leads that we had partnered with. We were paying for realtor.com. At the time, I think we were also doing a Ramsey program. So just a whole bunch of different funnels of leads coming in. And I learned a ton in terms of converting and what it took to actually turn these leads into actual consumers that were ready to buy or list real estate. And it was kind of frustrating, to say the least, right? So I guess a show of hands, a lot of you guys have cameras on. I don't have the chat open, but I'm curious, how many of you guys currently or of us pay for lead sources of some sort?
Used to. Yeah.
No one?
Gina does.
Gina?
Yeah.
Anyone else? I feel like somebody out there has to. Anyway. And I do get that obviously the relationships in the repeat business definitely can create that same synergy and consistency in business. But the frustration for me came from a couple of things. One, I had leads coming in that obviously they're cold, right? They really don't know whether they want to buy or sell. And ultimately the follow-up was relentless. It was like, I'm hounding them. So it felt less relationship based and super transactional, even though I was trying to make it feel genuine and reach out and be consistent. It starts to feel kind of spammy, right? And I was finding that it took sometimes a lengthy amount of time. And I'm talking, 9 months to a year of drip campaigns, being in their inbox, them seeing my face to finally say, I think you're my realtor, right? Like you've been talking to me in the background and they've never responded to me. And in the meantime, I'm also getting frustrated as I learn the industry and realize that at the end of the day, all of these platforms are essentially taking my listings and they're selling them back to me, right? They're selling all those sign calls, all those buyer inquiries and interest right back to me for a fee and a cost. Fast forward to a general era of social media. About 18 months ago, I dove in pretty deep and decided to make a bigger commitment to social media platforms. And upon joining EXP, it kind of aligned pretty perfect. I plugged into every network we had available that I could find. So I joined every workplace channel because I wanted to know what was out there. And originally, this came from a genuine curiosity of what other agents were doing to be successful with EXP and to jump in on trainings like these and to get to know a culture and figure out what was out there for me, right? So I'm plugging into these workplace channels and these groups, which then led to this magnifying attempt to get into every Facebook group I could find. So at this point, I've joined like 50 Facebook groups. I'm not kidding. And everything you can imagine, I am on. Oh, it's crazy. If I did my list right now, you guys would be blown away. And then same for the workplace groups. So everything that I could find that I could plug into, I was just taking in, right? So it was probably, is there a question? No? Okay, so it's just not on mute. Probably the end of, well, I guess it was a couple of months after I joined EXP, I had an agent reach out to me from San Diego and said, hey, I see you in all of my workplace groups because he was also in all of them. Can I talk to you about being a referral partner in Fresno? Sometimes I get these referrals, right? And I'm like, well, yeah, of course. And I had taken a couple over the years, nothing substantial or really notable. And so I started having dialogue with him and realizing what it was he was doing in nurturing all of these different platforms. And I was like, okay, well, this is kind of insightful, whatever. Did the deal, was great with the client, made a great relationship. Mind you, this agent has now sent me 2 more referrals in the last year. Then fast forward, I met a lovely lady out of Southern California. Her name's Deanne Dillard. So if you don't follow her, she's also with EXP. Jump on her Instagram and follow her. She does a lot with referral networks, and she got up on a stage here in Fresno, California, and inspired the heck out of me to jump in and really figure out how to talk to agents differently. Because I don't know about you guys, I would rather nurture agent relationships and have warm leads coming my direction. My conversion rate be, honestly, it's with buyers, it's about 50%. Unless they're truly relocating, and some of them kind of fall off, but you have a, buyer representation agreement and you're working and trying to nurture them, but the conversion is much higher. With listings, it's 75% conversion rate so far for me, and ultimately having the ability to create those relationships. So, sorry, I know I'm kind of,
Your slide?
yeah,
We're gonna see if we can share a screen real quick and you have
they're in Google. There you go. And then
there we
right
go.
here. Courtney's going to share our screen a little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
Dawn, can you guys see it? Because I can't see you.
Not yet.
Oh, you can't? Okay, hang on.
So
Okay, hang on. Need a Megan. I need a Megan here.
Megan is here.
I'm kidding.
I just not co-host, but I can. Oh, there we go. It's loading.
Now you can see
Okay.
it? Okay, good.
Perfect.
Loading.
Yeah.
It should
I
show.
knew I'd pull it off eventually.
We got it.
I told Courtney that I am Zoom
Right,
deficient, so I definitely needed her help in screen sharing. I can talk, but I don't know the tech side of it.
Let me go back.
You can leave it right there.
Okay.
It looks good. It's full screen.
Okay, cool.
Perfect. Just me leaning on a desk. That's great. Anyway, what I found, you guys, is all of those efforts that I was putting into these cold leads, right? And trying to figure out how to create and maintain some sort of relationship, some sort of genuine connection with them. When I turned the effort and started simply connecting with agents throughout the nation, it allowed me to present myself and place myself in a space where I became comfortable for them. I became somebody who they would network with and collaborate with on like a mastermind level, so that it's kind of starting to evolve into a no-brainer to say, if you've got anybody that is looking to buy, sell, or invest in Central California, I'm the first person they're calling. And sometimes I'm connecting them with another agent out of my territory and not being, holding on to that and saying, can I just be a connector of people and act in good faith and say, we'll share the wealth and spread the love for the sake of the relationship. So fast forwarding to results, and I know Courtney had mentioned capped in 60 days. So that was a challenge that I had set for myself going into this year with the momentum that I was riding last year. And I do feel like I need to note our average price point is $400,000. So it's not like I capped and we're selling, $1 million homes in California. I am in the most affordable pocket of California. And I do believe my average price point is probably close to a lot of the nation. The other small groups that I've shared any of this information with, they're like, oh my gosh, there must be a super high price point, or it's got to be different, and nobody wants to relocate to my area. And I remind them I am in Fresno, California. So if there are clients looking to move to Fresno, California, or to list here to move elsewhere, which probably is the majority, I definitely can assure you that your area or neck of the woods certainly will benefit from the same type of relationships and business models. So this year so far, I've closed 23 transactions. Half of those have come from agent to agent referrals. I also currently have several active listings. So I have 3 active listings that are referrals, and then I have 3 with signed listing agreements that are referrals. And then I have 3 BRBCs signed that are referrals. So still on the same trajectory to impact business and say, my overall goal this year was to close 60 transactions. And at this point, for half of them, so hitting the 50% mark, to be agent to agent referrals. I've had the opportunity to stop paying for leads, minus the one that I'm still stuck in on a commitment that should run here shortly and be done. But at the end of the day, really focusing in on those relationships instead.
And you got 2 yesterday while I was with you.
I did. Yeah. I got 2 yesterday. And honestly, will you go to the how we did it screen or the next slide?
Maybe.
Again, zoom in.
There we go.
So again, I kind of spoke to the steps that were taken. First being, joining those referral networks. And I have to tell you guys, I I was asked by people in my office, so agents that I have actually spent time and recruited to be on this journey with me at EXP, and they asked why I'm doing so well this year, and I shared all of these tools with them. And does anyone want to guess how many of them are doing it?
0.
0. So often I think we take the tools and we take in the information and it's like, oh my gosh, that's so much work. And really it's the same amount of work just repurposed into a different place. And if they're spinning their wheels in a space or a place that doesn't seem to be amplifying their business, then maybe shift gears a little bit. Not only did I join all of those referral networks, but I also went through and optimized my profile. So on EXP and Enterprise, we have an agent profile section that when other agents within our organization look us up and are looking for referrals in our territory, having a bio, and I got to tell you guys, having a photo attached, I know that sounds so simple, but when I see the weird little avatar that's just where a person is supposed to be, I'm not going to reach out to that person. I don't feel connected to them. I don't feel like they took the time to even create a valid and thorough biography. So updating all of your platforms 100% was helpful. I also created just kind of a basic script that I can respond to people in those platforms. So a little bit about me, right? Who I am, that I run a small little intimate team here in Fresno. It's very versatile where I can plug and play depending on what their specific need was, but it makes it very easy for me to apply a speed to lead mentality, much like we would in any other lead platform, right? If I'm joining these groups and I've got somebody asking for, an agent in Tulare, California, which is within my territory, I want to be able to respond to them very quickly. So I would also say turn your notifications on. So for those of you who are like, there's so much noise in workplace, or I don't want my Facebook notifications, I can assure you those are leads. That's like people calling your sign in a yard and reacting with that same level of excitement and the word I'm looking for, initiative is definitely helpful. Go ahead. Courtney's like, maybe I'm on the challenge bus too.
I'm a Mac girl.
That's so
Is this
funny.
the right one?
Yep.
Okay.
So within, I have the 2 separate scripts that I send out to agents when they're inquiring about a lead in an area. And one is simply a hello, I'd love to be of service. Let me know if I can be helpful. I'd love to interview for the position. So I come from a place of humility. And then the second note, once they're engaged, I kind of have like a brief list of a little baby bio, right? Talking about our areas of expertise, what I'm certified in, and what my process usually is. And I think as agents, we often talk about like our value proposition, whether it's for attraction or whether it's for um, converting leads and consumers into actual clients. And really honing in on what it is that makes you special and what it is that makes you the one that they're going to choose and feel comfortable with, and leaning in on those skills. So certifications, obviously that's education, right? We spent time immersing and getting those cute little badges that we can put all over our pages. But at the end of the day, understanding that, another agent is looking for someone with local expertise. They're looking for someone who may or may not be willing to allow them to stay immersed into a transaction. I mean, that's often hard for agents to do, right? It's like, gosh, I don't want them to interject and have an opinion. And ultimately, they sometimes are your teammate in that process. Your communication style and what they can expect from you in terms of updates, even if they're a little bit hands off, sometimes agents like to know at least the timeline, right? Like, how's the listing going? When are you going live? I mean, at the end of the day, they're getting a paycheck at the end of it, right? So an update is pretty important. And then overall, your unique offering, who you are, what you're all about, and what makes you stand out in a crowd. I know, left side. Courtney's like, I
Okay,
got
there we
this.
go.
All right. And when it's all said and done, I will say this has been a newer attempt. So I've got kind of my quick Google link and reviews that I've always sent to clients at the end of transactions. And I've shifted gears a little bit to try to acquire reviews from agents, even on the other side of transactions here locally. And then any agent that has sent me a referral, hoping that they'll do a Google review also. When I am interviewing for a referral from any agent, I do encourage them to check out both my consumer reviews on a site such as Zillow, and then also on Google, because that has a mix of other agent and consumer reviews. And then again, just follow up and then nurturing those relationships. So I check in on these agents still, right? We're connected on social media. When it's been a couple of months since we've done a transaction together, how are you? How's everything going? And making sure that they still feel like part of your expanded real estate network. All right. Well, before I go to key takeaways, I've just downloaded and talked at a million miles a minute. So I'm curious if anybody has comments or questions or thoughts.
Can unmute.
Amanda, what would you say is your value proposition for the agent? What do you tell them specifically that makes you unique?
I think it's an interesting question, Don, because at the end of the day, I can still sell houses. My marketing components can be similar to a lot of other agents in our area. And I think what helps most is a willingness to ask them what they're looking for in a partner first off. So, I'm kind of posing the question back and saying, what level of partnership are you looking for? Have you known this individual long? Because I think being able to help them feel confident, their name's on the line here, right? So if they're choosing you and they're recommending you to their client, they need to feel comfortable that that client's not going to circle back and be angry with them or frustrated based upon their experience later. So I'm turning it back around to just like I would with a consumer, what's important to you in an agent, what are you looking for in terms of a partnership? How can I help best? Tell me a little bit about your client. And what that then does is allow me to hone in on what I would do. And I think that's the most helpful thing is having kind of an internal strategy is what I would say is my biggest skill set. So if they, for example, say I have a buyer moving from Texas, which right now I do, and they're coming in July to tour for 3 days, I'm going to say, okay, well, what I'd like to do first before we even start looking at houses is make sure they have a clear understanding of the different pockets and what life would be like to live in these areas. So instead of going into how many beds, how many baths, how many anything, I'm trying to get to know the client, and immediately that helps the agent feel at ease and super comfortable. So I don't know that it's really a value prop for me. It's more presenting what I'm good at, and that is seeking to understand how to meet someone's needs and to align them with a genuine experience versus selling them a house.
I
Yeah,
can
that
say,
it sounds like a
Donna,
listing appointment that can continue to pay and pay, right?
Yeah.
Because I think people also underestimate when you build a relationship with, say, a Deanne Dillard, she's also connected to several hundred other agents.
Exactly.
And so what might happen is one of them will say, hey, Deanne, do you know of anybody in Fresno,
Yep.
Central Valley? And so I'll bet you get some of your deals because you've made such a positive impression on that agent, even though they may not have that direct referral.
Exactly. And that's because that credibility stands, and you do that for one another, right? So if anybody asks me, hey, do you have anybody in Sacramento, or do you do Sacramento? I might know it's too far for me. Okay, who do you know? I've got 2 agents. You should interview them both. They're both fantastic. Let me give you their contact. And I think that that is just as important, because now you're not only seeking the direct referral, but you're being referred by others within all of the networks that you're participating in and being part of.
Yeah.
and I was just going to add, I heard her when I was in here, when I found out how many referrals she was doing on the phone. And she essentially treats the conversation with the agent like a buyer consult. And it's like, it's an interview of both ways. And it was just, it wasn't like, okay, yeah, sure, I can take the lead. Yeah, I work that area. What's their name? You want to give me their information? I'll sign the referral. It wasn't just like what I've heard before. It was much more in depth. And I could hear her building the relationship on that initial phone call, which I was impressed with.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think we all, everybody on this call today has been in real estate and knows that, I always say relationships equal revenue. We all know that equation. And that goes for every platform in which you acquire business from. So whether that's B2B leads, whether that's, other vendors within your market, whether that's agent to agent referrals or direct to consumer, without establishing and maintaining and nurturing a relationship, you're just going to do one-off deals and not necessarily have an ongoing relationship. And who's to say, the referral I closed last week was a listing, and that agent lives in Oregon. So she's, we have agents up there. I guarantee you, in the event I had someone in her small town, I would 100% repay the favor and have that conversation with her to make sure she understood what I needed, right? And she'd meet those needs. But I would give that business back because she did that. So maintaining that relationship is super important.
So we have a couple questions from Blake. Can you touch on how active or what you're doing in all these groups that you're joining?
Yep. So similar to what you would expect, just like so let me backtrack. So on our regular social media pages, so on my Instagram feed, if someone's interacting with me, I'm, commenting back, I'm liking their comment, right? And then on the flip side, we all know if we don't go do that to other people's pages, our algorithm doesn't get boosted and they're not seeing us. We're not really engaging with them. We're waiting for them to engage with us. So on these pages, I'm participating. If there's a conversation or a generalized question, I chime in. I like things, I share things. I share posts about listings, not even in my area. I'm starting to become tagged in listings in Texas or listings in LA or, other people's business to where I can then share and forward because you never know who might be looking. I would also say, if you start to pay attention to where you're tagged and definitely like or respond to those, even if it feels irrelevant in the moment, you acknowledging that somebody thought of you when they posted something or shared something is super important. What was the other question?
And then the other question is, are you doing a lot of outbound referrals? If so, can you talk about that part as well?
I can, and I'm not currently. I will say that I've had the opportunity to do a couple, and they were both of the outbound referrals that I've done within the last 18 months were prior to an emphasis on this part of my business. And I will say a lot of the learnings based upon why I feel I'm good, right? And why I feel I've been successful, I will probably push to that process because I've had two particular experiences where I sought out referral agents on the other end, and it didn't go so well. It was, and so when I say it's really important to the agent who's referring to feel like they gave their client the opportunity to have a wonderful experience, that was very hard for me. Like at one, we had to seek out another alternate agent, and with the other one, we kind of just muddled through, and I kind of helped navigate the transaction a little bit to make sure that the client felt supported. And I think the key learnings from that also have helped me understand how to be better and how to be a really good partner for that agent referring in. So I do think there's a huge opportunity, and I would probably interview different. Great question. Anyone else?
Amanda, do you check on how much production if you're placing a referral, how much production the agent is doing?
I do. I think it's important to know that they're in tune with the market and that they have the bandwidth to take on a client. So I will say that often, and it probably does agents disservice, and they may not want to know that I say this, but if they do a ton of transactions, I'm kind of hesitant. Mainly because one of my first lines when someone reaches out to me is I run a small intimate team, but any referral I take personally and their full experience will be with me. They've already been passed off from you to me. And the last thing they need to experience is the feeling of being passed off again. And my biggest fear is that if I'm referring out to an agent that has a super high transaction count, that they are going to have a junior agent. And if that's the case, great, but I want to talk to that junior agent. I don't want to talk to the team lead. I want to talk to who's going to be delivering that experience. And they could be wonderful, but that connection would need to be there. And then on the flip side, with someone who is potentially not doing many transactions, my biggest concern is really what's happening in the market. Do they, have a pulse on it? Do they know how to best support a client's needs? Although they obviously may have the time and bandwidth, maybe not the skill set.
Yeah, I think probably the sweet spot in our industry is 2 to 4 transactions a month.
Yeah.
The other thing that I found is that for most agents, and of course it does vary by area, but the amount of referrals that they send, so in other words, the reciprocity value is usually about 20% of their annualized volume. So if they're doing 20 deals a year, they're probably going to send 4 referrals a year, roughly. So that, and have you given any thought to whether they're EXP or not? Meaning, because I know that Deanne Dillard, for example, has been pretty successful. Actually, Shireen Duncan as well. Both have been very successful in doing referral relationships. And then I know that in Shireen's case, she says, hey, I know you're with Sotheby's and I'm happy to refer you. And no obligation to join me at EXP. I do ask, though, that you will be willing to take a look at it.
Yeah.
So she actually does make that condition, and it's been successful for her. What has your experience been in that regard?
Yeah, so I would say that I definitely think I like to share broker to broker first, right? Because most of the networks that I am plugged into, especially from a workplace component, are EXP agents and a lot of the Facebook groups. Now, with that said, I do think it's an incredible opportunity to have the attraction conversation because this is someone who is already, they've had an experience with you. So they know what resources you have. They've gotten to know you throughout a transaction or even longer than that, right? I have an agent that I've been talking to. She reached back out to me yesterday and said, okay, my clients are ready to go. I pulled up my original conversation with her. It was September of last year that we initially started talking about these clients. I haven't even met the clients yet. So, and she's in Idaho and she's not with EXP. So some of these, because there's follow up and I'm checking and like, hey, how are you? How are Tom and Sherry? Do you think they're ready to have a conversation yet? How's the market up there? She's gotten to know me over the last, 9 months and started to understand what my culture or who I am in my being is all about. And I do think it's a huge platform and opportunity. Same as the agent I just mentioned from Oregon. I do think that there's the opportunity. She's with a very small brokerage to have that conversation and see if there's some interest there. So I think it's a wonderful, wonderful point, Don.
Yeah, now Shireen is in Hawaii. She's in Oahu, a terrific, by the way, EXP agent there. That being said, a lot of her deals are in the luxury space. And one thing that a little strategy that she has done quite successfully, I'm curious if you've looked at this, is she says, hey, by the way, if you do decide to join me before this transaction closes or commit to that, I'm going to waive the referral. And the last one that I was involved with her, it was like $3 million deal, right? So,
Yeah.
3 million, 75,000, that's a 20K referral that pays your cap for the year.
Right, exactly. And what a huge benefit. And I think as you're referring out, like that's an incredible opportunity to incentivize a little bit and be like, look, at the end of the day, like we all love to make money, but I can give you a little extra padded bonus beyond all of the collaboration and excellent excitement that you'll get when you do come to EXP. So that's a great idea.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that.
Well, she's got over 600 agents now, so it's worked pretty well.
It's clearly working.
Wow.
She's like, all right, so pay their cap. Got it. All right, what else, you guys?
Yeah, you can do your takeaway.
All right, so key takeaways. Obviously, I know I've said it several times over, and we all know this to be true, but I feel like internalizing things and hearing them and saying them on repeat is important. And that is that relationships truly equal revenue and that connections drive business growth, period. Whether that's from a learning, new partners, anybody who is part of your business strategy and structure. Be genuine and nurture the relationship. A hello and an introduction is not a relationship. So work to build those. Make your connections intentional. So be strategic about your relationship building. And what I mean by that is what I mentioned earlier. If you're commenting on something or you're reaching out to someone, reference, like I'll use my email as an example for that agent in Idaho. I didn't just say checking in, are your sellers ready? I said, and I called the buyers by name. How are they doing? Are they ready to have a meeting yet? How are you? How's business in your area? So creating an intentional connection that binds a care for that human being as well as the end game that you're trying to get to. And that obviously goes into staying genuine. And lastly is be visible and valuable. So if you can be the connector of people, if you can give someone a resource, that agent in Oregon, she interviewed 2 other agents. And I know that there were agents that had lower fees than me. She specifically stated that. But when she first reached out and came to town and asked me and found me online, and we decided to have these conversations, she had asked, before they met anybody, if I happened to know an estate planner, sent her 3 different options. She asked if I happened to know a mobile notary. I sent her 2 options. I didn't ask for anything in return. So before I even had a conversation with this agent, I had already given her value and asked for nothing. So that made me that much more visible and already valuable to her, regardless of whether or not my fee was going to be a little bit higher. She knew that her in-laws were going to be well taken care of.
Gosh darn it.
I know.
Love
There we go.
Okay. And then lastly was just, so if you have the opportunity and have any desire to follow on Instagram, there's a scannable, and then I'm always open for conversations and obviously referrals. And likewise, if you have any ideas or thoughts, or you've done something that's worked really well, I would love to hear those things, whether it's now or later. So please connect and say hello.
I want to point out, by the way, that you've had enough success with this now that you can get yourself on some pretty significant nationwide podcasts. I happen to know somebody sitting next to you that's got a pretty popular podcast.
I know. Well, fast
She's
forward,
been on it.
it was a year ago. That was
Yeah,
right
that was
after
a
I
year
joined.
ago. We'll have to get you back on.
Yeah, but because now you've got a story. I mean,
Right.
and you're sort of like a shining example of how not to be disintermediated by big tech, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because honestly, I think it's the current way of the real estate world for, I would say, a good majority of the agents. And if we can circumvent that, and I can, pay another fellow agent who did their own hard work in converting someone or building and establishing a relationship with someone, I would much rather give that 25 to 30% to them.
Yeah.
Well,
Cool.
thank you, Amanda.
Yeah.
So appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Does anyone else have any last questions before we sign off? Okay. Tom, we don't have Tom.
I know.
Oh, there's
Tom's in the
Tom.
car.
He's got to say
Awesome.
nine.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amanda, Courtney. This was amazing. So next week, we have one of the top influencers in the country who just joined EXP. She has a huge organization. She was an integral part of the Ben Kinney organization, Via Williams. She is going to share how to build a team. She has helped build over 100 teams for agents and leaders across the country. So not going to want to miss it. Next Wednesday, same bat time, same bat channel right here. See y'all next week. Now you got your inspiration. Time to put in the perspiration. Thanks again. Let's go.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Amanda. That was great. Thanks, Courtney.